Okay, at this time, our special guest has arrived as promised. He's here to deliver a message as he did, I think, last year as well. So please welcome Mayor Ed Murray.
Thank you and good afternoon. It is an honor to be here this afternoon at this very important rite of passage. You know, I was here last year just after I became mayor, and in the year that has happened in between, this country has entered into a new phase in our history in confronting racism and in confronting institutional racism. Whether it's the events at Ferguson or the events of the last weeks in North Charleston, we know we need to do something. We know it's time to move forward again. In the ceremony today, the breakfast group in its mission of nearly 40 years speaks to that challenge. The commitment, in the words of your co-founder, Herman McKinney, reaching back and helping somebody else to achieve is what we have to all be about. We know we have to create a clear pathway for young folks, for young African American men and women, and we know we have a lot of work to do. 40% of African American young people will either fail to graduate on time or fail to graduate altogether. The disparities in math and education results in our school district are still too great. 54% of African American children in the city of Seattle live in poverty. That is a 10% increase over 10 years ago. But we are a hopeful city, and this is a city that steps up. And that's why the Project Mister, this mentoring program, is so important. And that's why the city stepped up with $75,000 and is going to step up again in 2015 with an additional $100,000. What the breakfast group got right 24 years ago was that mentoring a young person can make a difference. And we know the results. We've heard from some of the people who've been in this program. And what they've told us is they're more likely to enroll in college. Actually, the numbers are 45% more likely. They're more likely to be involved in an activity or an athletic sport. They're most likely to be involved in giving back to their community. And they're more likely than anything to have a very, very different future because of mentoring. So on behalf of the City of Seattle, I want to thank the mentors here for what you are doing, and the mentees here for your willingness to participate and improve your lives and improve the lives of this city. We also know that we need to do more because one of the best ways we can turn the corner on youth violence is through jobs. We know that if a young person is involved in a summer job, they're less likely to be a victim of a crime, and they're very unlikely to be involved in criminal activity. When I became mayor, the city had a youth summer program of 600 summer jobs. This year, we've committed to creating 2,000 summer jobs. And I have to tell you why I'm happy with that goal. Seattle's now a bigger city than Boston, and Boston has 10,000 summer jobs. So 2,000 this year, but we didn't beat Boston in the Super Bowl this year, but let's beat them in the jobs next year. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the Super Bowl, sorry. I want to give a special thanks to Amani Harris for his work in putting together this effort to create the Mayor's Summer Youth Job Employment Initiative. Tomorrow, I would like to ask any of you who are available to join us at the Youth Opportunity Summit, where we are going to engage with young people, and by the way, we have about 300 young people coming tomorrow, to hear from them about how we can continue to be a city that develops an approach that moves people, particularly African American young men, out of violence, out of the criminal justice system, and into jobs and into education. So I hope you can join us tomorrow. I want to thank Chris Webb and Al Heron for helping put that together. Thank you. There you are. Thanks very much. So let me close. First of all, I know he's not here, but I want to give a special call out to somebody who has been a friend of mine and 20 years ago when I first went to the legislature, a mentor of mine. I want to call him out, thank him for his work, and wish him well, and that's Nate Miles. So let's hear it for Nate.
Braxton is a 2000 inductee to the prestigious Morehouse College Board of Preachers. He is a member of the Evangelicals for the Middle East Unity and currently serves as the president of the Congress of Christian Education for North Pacific Baptist Convention. Dr. Braxton is married and has 2 children. Please welcome to the podium the Reverend Dr. Leslie Braxton. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Gary in part for his introduction. He started off, he said, this young man was with us a few years ago, and I thought, what a godly man he is. But my people heard him. He did introduce me as a young man. Then he turned around and threw me under the bus when he said I was born in Boston. I did meet, I forgot his name, the gentleman that's working with the Seahawks now. What is it? Ed Goins. And I asked him, what's his job title? General Counsel. I asked him if he had anything to do with play selection. And I'm like you, I'm still traumatized. We're a whole city suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. I really appreciated the remarks from the head of the hotel here, Mr. Matthews, John Matthews, because he mentioned his mistakes in the past and that he had some people who, and I quote him, he said, could kick his ass and when he needed it. And I appreciated that because as a pastor, you don't get very many opportunities to curse in public and it not be considered inappropriate. So I'm glad that those people kicked your ass when you needed it. I got to get it in while I can. I'm just quoting, I'm not saying it, I'm just quoting him. To the breakfast group, the work that you do, let's give them a great big hand. No one can make their way out of a ditch unless someone extend them a hand. To Turner Construction, to Ruby Jones, who was one of our original board members at New Beginnings Christian Fellowship, and Turner, everyone associated with Turner. Turner built our sanctuary under its special projects, and so we are a monument in the community unto the good works that they do and the community consciousness that they have. So my salute goes out to Turner Construction. And to the mayor, now in his absence, we give thanks for a man of consciousness who is making our city, Emerald City, once again one of the most livable cities in America. To young Chandler Williams, what a talent that he has. And his father, Clarence, I know is proud, but stewarding and shepherding 2 young talented boys is no small task. To Lem Howe, who I think is the greatest legal mind in the Pacific Northwest, we salute you and we thank God for you. That's my opinion and I'm sticking to it. I don't want to take too much time. They told me I only had an hour and a half to speak. So I don't want to take quite all of that time. I want to speak directly to our young men here on this day. I want to use the subject, Joseph's seed. Joseph's seed. And I'm referring to the guy, Joseph, that we find in the 37th chapter. He appears in the 37th chapter of the book of Genesis. And even if you've never been to church or temple, it is a legacy that is iconic. It is the young man of dreams and who had a coat of many colors. He had some challenges. If I were to give a shorthand summary on his life, it would be a young man whose gift got him in trouble and the same gift got him out of trouble. And if you remember nothing else about this message that I give you today, young men, is that it is your gift that may get you in trouble, but it can get you out of trouble. Trust your gift. Somebody say, trust your gift. Joseph's challenges was twofold. Though he was gifted, he came from a challenging family, and he came from and he had to deal with an oppressive and imperfect world. He came from a challenging family in that he was the 11th of 12 brothers, born to the man we know as Jacob. His name was later changed to Israel, the progenitor of the 12 tribes of Israel. He was the next to the youngest. But not only that, when you drill down a little deeper, in a patriarchal society, he was born into a family where those 12 boys came from 4 different mothers. So yes, there was a lot of baby mama drama going on in the house that he came from. And he had two gifts that made him the target for the haters around him, near and far. He had a gift from his earthly father and a gift from his heavenly father. From his earthly father, he had a gift of a coat of many colors. It was an expensive and elaborate and exotic lounging garment, which was telling of the lack of responsibilities that he had in his father's house. While his brothers tediously worked in the fields from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, he and his little brother Benjamin, who was the baby boy, too old to do any labor, they were exempted from these labors because they were the two children born to the one woman that his father Jacob really loved. A man may have many women, but I promise only one will have his heart. But that's a whole nother sermon for a whole nother day. You got to come to 19300 108th Avenue Southeast to get that sermon. And Rachel died in childbirth to his little brother Benjamin, and the only thing Jacob had left of his beloved Rachel were the two sons born to him, and the longing and yearning he had for her, he transferred on to those sons who got a conspicuously disproportionate raised amount of lap time than the other boys got. And that coat of many colors just epitomized the preferential parenting practices that Jacob practiced in that home. And none of us have a problem with recognition except when it's going too much in someone else's direction. And the practice of favoritism had the impact over time of turning his brothers into homicidal maniacs. And they collectively concocted a scheme to literally kill their brother and then tell their father he had been murdered by some wild animal, so that they could get rid of this young man who had everything they thought they wanted, which was their father's love and attention. They would later modify the plot so that they didn't want the blood of the innocent on their hands, blood guilt they called it, so they said, well, we'll just sell him off into the hands of slave traders. We'll be rid of him nonetheless, and we'll still tell Daddy that he was killed by wild animals. He had his father's love, epitomized by this coat of many colors. But it seemed that God himself got in on the favoritism, because he also had a gift from heaven. They called it the onar, the gift of dreams, the ability to foresee coming events. It was as if God would thin the veil that separates the terrestrial from the celestial, the now from the not yet, and allow him to peek into yonders, the gay substratum tadretate, the mists of eternity, and see what was forthcoming. He told his brothers that, one day is going to come a time when you and others will bow in obeisance to me. And you got to be careful who you tell your dreams to. And the thing about this gift of dreams, they knew it was a gift that only God's, only the divine, only the eternal, only the deity can give. It wasn't anything that you could concoct. It was truly God-given. It was charisma. It was a grace gift. Seems like even God is unfair sometimes. And the only thing you need to do to get enemies in this world is to just be too good for somebody, just to be too talented, to be too good looking, just to come from too good of a family, or to seem to have something that everybody else wants. And to put a great big old bullseye on Joe, and his brothers would sell him off into slavery, And there's a long story after that, but there's three things I want to say to the young men and the not-so-young men here in this place, and the wannabe young men like myself who are at a stage in life where your greatest fantasy is when somebody still calls you young or you get carded. In relationship to your gift, do your best by your gift. Keep your nose clean and walk in hope. That's really all I want to say to you. Do your best by your gift. Keep your nose clean and walk in hope. I could sit down now and be done, but that would be, I would misrepresent my whole fraternity of preachers, that we just, brevity is not our virtue. I'm not going to hold you long. Do your best by your gift. As the story goes, Joseph, even when sold into slavery, he landed in the house of a man named Potiphar, a high Egyptian official, and everything Joseph touched turned to gold. He was legally classified as a slave, but even in a status of a slave, even stigmatized, even labeled, no one could question the quality and the character of his work. Joseph mastered. He used his gift, and he was good at what he was doing. He was willing, and he was able. And every young man in here, while you may have come from a challenging family like Joseph's, a family that has its own made-for-TV reality show going on, and you may live in an imperfect world divided between haves and have-nots, bond and free, slave and slave masters, rich and poor, that still you have a gift. And the odds may be stacked against you, but we can beat the odds. Gifted young men from challenging families and oppressive and imperfect worlds, you can still beat the odds if you will first do right by your gift. Joseph made up his mind that whatever he did, he was going to do right. And you have to make up your mind. I know something about this. My own father spent 44 years in prison. My stepfather went to prison. My one and only brother spent the majority, over 30 years of his adult life in prison. And I know something about coming from challenging circumstances. I know something about living in an imperfect world. You live in an imperfect world. You live in a world that is imperfect in terms of opportunities. We live in an imperfect society where the top 400 families have a net worth that exceeds that of the bottom 150 million. That's half the U.S. population. We have an economic system, we have an economy that is structured such that 400 families have a wealth that exceeds that of the bottom half of the family, bottom half of the nation. We literally have an economy where there is a wider gap between haves and have-nots than there was before the stock market crash in 1929. We literally have an economy that is a wider gap, income disparity, than the old Roman Empire. And there are those who believe that there needs to be even more advantages given to those who are making record profits and not translating it into higher salaries or greater worker protections for people. We live in a very economically imperfect world. We live in a very educationally imperfect world. And you've got to make the best of your gift. There's some numbers you need to remember. 10.1, 4.7, 8.6, 2.5. I said 10.1, 4.7, 8.6, 2.5. What do those numbers represent? 4.7 represents the unemployment rate currently, right now, today, in April of 2015, of the unemployment rate of white Americans. 4.7 unemployment, and yet for African Americans it is 10.1, more than double. 4.7 for white Americans and 10.1 for African Americans. Drill down a little further, and we find that 8.6 and 2.5, 8.6 represents the unemployment rate right now in April of 2015 for people who do not have a high school diploma. 8.6. 2.5 represents the unemployment rate for people who have a four-year degree or better. 2.5% is the unemployment rate. 75% of people who lost their jobs in the Great Recession had a high school diploma or less. And for those persons who had a college degree or more, the average time that they were out of work before being reabsorbed in the economy was only 3 months. Education does matter. And we know that for persons who get a four-year degree or better, that they make 1.2 to $1.5 million more in income over their working years than someone who has a high school diploma or less. Arthur Fletcher, a black man in the Nixon administration, imagine that, was the one who coined the term that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Even though we come from challenging backgrounds and live in an imperfect society that would allow 400 families to have more net worth than half, the bottom half of the country, you've got to do right by your gift, and you've got to get you some education by any means necessary. By any means necessary. For those of you who are in the room like us, who are the beneficiary of other people's generosities, the one investment that always portends a great return is an education. You cannot go wrong investing in the education, because education is the turnkey that in one generation can bless and affect every generation that comes after it. So for the Breakfast Club and churches and the city and community organizations and you as an individual, take one less cruise and give a scholarship contribution to anybody who's given money to young people so that they can be the best at whatever they are. Education. Education. Develop and do right by your gift. Joseph developed himself, even coming from a challenging family in an imperfect world. You got to do right by your gift. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. You know, there's a poem written by Marion Williamson that Nelson Mandela reached 8,300 miles across the Atlantic Ocean to quote on the day that he rose to the presidency of a free democratic South Africa. He dusted off a poem that had gained little notice. It said, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond recognition. It is our light, not our darkness, that is most frightening to us." We ask ourselves, who are we to be gorgeous, gifted, beautiful, talented? Who are we not to be? We are a child of God. Playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others will not feel insecure around you. We are called to make manifest the glory of God that's within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. When we allow our own lights to shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. When we're liberated from our own fears, our very presence automatically liberates others. And some of us in here today, we're around people who are afraid to do good, afraid, fear, doubt that there is possibility in them because they come from generations of underachievement because of the imperfections of the society in which we live. When half the people have less money than the top 400, that means a lot of people simply cannot get access so that they can be something, and you have generations of underachievement. Layer it over racism, sexism, homophobia, all of the type of isms that lock people out. But you've got to believe that it is your light, not your darkness. Some people are simply afraid to do good. And let me tell you something. If you're going to do right and do the best by your gift, you've got to be careful of the company that you keep. But you got to put forth your best effort. You got to put forth your best effort. Martin Luther King used to always quote some unknown but not unwise writer who said, if you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley. But be the best little bush on the side of the reel. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a moon, be a star. Isn't by size that you win or you fail, be the best at whatever you are. If it befalls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, there lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. There are a lot of people who want to know when they go into a class, they ask the teacher, what do I need to do to pass? If your only goal is to pass, somebody need to kick your ass. I'm not cussing, I'm just quoting the head of the hotel. What do I need to do to be the best? What do I need to do to be on top? Reach for the moon. If you miss it, you still come up with a star. You got to be the best. You got to do right by your gift, right by your talent. You got to be the best. Closely associated with that, with doing right by your gift. You have a gift. I don't know if it's in athletics. I don't know if it's in music. I don't know if it's in science. I don't know if it's in technology. I don't know if it's in making clothes. I don't know if it's in education. But you got a gift. Everybody's got something that they can do a little bit better than somebody else, and you got to develop it. Be the best at whatever you are. And while you do that, everybody's got charisma, grace gift, the Greeks called it. charisma, grace gift. God also got to make sure you keep your nose clean. There's an old saying that says sometimes our charisma, our talent can take us where our character can't keep us. Our talent can take us where our character can't keep us. And we see so many of Joseph's seed, greatly talented men who self-destruct. The story of Joseph, when he got into Potiphar's house, he was a man who spent too much time in the war theater. He had a restless wife at home. She was a cougar. She didn't go to WSU. But she was a cougar nonetheless. Frustrated woman whose husband was gone too long and saw this young, gifted, black young man. I get so tired of Hollywood casting movies about these African people as if it's a Celtic or a Viking movie. That's a whole nother sermon. Just come to... And she decided one day, with no modesty whatsoever, she reached for Joseph's trousers, his tunic, and he left it and ran. She told the lie this was a society when an Egyptian woman cried, a Hebrew boy died. So he went to jail on trumped-up charges, but his integrity was intact. He did go on false charges. There is a difference between going on false charges and when the charge is right. In an imperfect world, you may not can control whether or not somebody hits you with false charges, but you can make sure that the charges are false. We live in a society where so many people who are gifted, Joseph C., Johnny Manziel, Joseph C., Warren Sapp, future Hall of Famer from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and finished his career in the graveyard of all formerly great NFL players in the Oakland Raiders, where they dump all those who can't play no more. NFL analyst, but picked up 2 ladies of the night and decided that he wanted a discount. Found out there's some people that there's no buyer's remorse in some professions. And stripped of his job with the NFL. Don't forget the Jameis Winston's, who no one questions whether or not he can play the game. They're just wondering, will he stay out of trouble long enough to be in the game? The Michael Jacksons, the king of pop, but couldn't manage himself. The Whitney Houstons. So many great, talented Joseph C's, but they shot themselves. Right there, my deacon Clarence Williams, he was the president of the Black Firefighters of America. Back in the days of the Civil Rights Movement, he had a registered pistol and got in, was talking to a policeman and dropped his pistol and discharged and shot himself in the leg. Clarence's claim to fame, he shot himself in the leg. Who would think that a man who shot himself in the leg would have such a talented kid? I'm telling you, with God, all things are possible. The worst thing in the world to do is to shoot your own self. So often we see people shoot themselves in the leg. I tell my son, he's a junior at Morehouse College, and my daughter, who just graduated from Howard University, and my nieces and nephews, I said, if you avoid gangs, guns, and drugs, making babies before you make a family, stay in church, mosque, or temple, and school, and it's almost impossible not to live a good life in American society as it is today with all of its imperfections. It is still a land where Sotomayor can end up on the Supreme Court. It is still a land where you can become a CEO of a major company. It is still a land where you not only can play basketball on the court, but you can be an owner of a team. It's still a land where you can literally be whatever you want to be, even if you come from a challenging family in this imperfect society, as long as you don't shoot yourself in the foot. If you avoid gangs, guns, and drugs, making babies before you make a family, stay in church, temple, and mosque, and in school, it's almost impossible for you to not live a good life in American society. A few years ago, my wife came into the bedroom 11 o'clock at night and handed me my son's book bag that he had gotten from Morehouse College when we went to Prospective Students Weekend. And Brother Dunstan, we went down there and was proud to give him this backpack, and Robert Michael Franklin, president at the time, that says, this book bag will hold the books that's going to fill your head with knowledge one day in the pursuit of becoming a Morehouse man, and you will go from there as a member of the greatest men's fraternity, black male fraternity on the face of the earth, to live a successful life. And she handed me the book bag and she said, open it up. I said, why? She said, because I said so. So like a little kid, I opened it up. As soon as I began to unzip it, the smell knocked me in my face, a smell that I never thought I would smell from anything, from any one of my kids who have heard me say over and over again, if you avoid gangs, guns, and drugs, making babies before you make a family, and stay in temple, mosque, and school, you're almost impossible for you to not to live a great life in American society today, where crime and drugs have decimated and emaciated my family. And the smell of marijuana jumped out of that book bag, and I said, "What is that?" She said, "You know what it is." I said, "Well, it ain't mine." She said, "I know it's not yours." I marched ceremoniously down the hall into my son's room. We had his earphones on, and I dropped the book bag on his bed, snatched the earplugs out of his ears, and I said, "What is this?" He looked at me, and his eyes got all big. And he said, "It's mine." I said, "What is marijuana and rolling papers and a bong doing in a Morehouse book bag in my house?" And in the middle of the night, me in my boxer shorts and him in his drawers went out the house and walked to Renton Avenue, and I threw the book bag into the middle of oncoming traffic. He said, "You're throwing my book bag away." I said, "Only because you're doing it, because if you're going to start fooling with drugs, you are throwing your life away." And we went back to the house. And that night, he shared in the testimony of the owner of this hotel, because he found out he had an ass kicker in his life. And if there's any police in here, yes, I did it. I'll be waiting for you at the door, but I kicked his ass so you won't shoot him later. My son is not afraid of the police. He's afraid of Papa who don't take no mess. You got to do right by your dream. You got to choose carefully the company that you keep. And young men, you got to get a hold of your monster. What am I talking about? Your monster. Your monster, that part of you that flares up when the little Beyoncés of life go by you and something in you goes, uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. Your monster. The part of you that goes, "I like big and I cannot lie," though other brothers try to deny. When a girl walks in with an itty-bitty waist and a round thing in my face, I get crunk. Now, some of you don't know that song, but these brothers, they know that song. There's a little shorty, there's a little chicken head waiting to help each one of you explode and implode your own dreams. Bishop McKenzie used to always say, "A man who cannot govern his passions cannot prosper." You got to do right by your own gift. You got to develop your gift, give your best, but you also got to keep your nose clean. Don't let your talent take you where your character can't keep you. Because if it does, if your character is in line with your charisma, you can be the seed that prospers in bad soil, even in an imperfect world coming from challenging families. But finally, you got to walk in hope. You got to walk in hope. What is walking in hope? Well, hope is just believing that the odds are stacked against you, that God is doing something that you cannot see. And God is always working in ways that are beyond what these eyes can see. And walking in hope means I'm going to just get started and believe that as our slave foreparents used to say, over my head, there must be a God somewhere. And Joseph just kept on doing what he was doing. He spent 13 years in prison on trumped-up charges till there came a time when none of the king's men could solve the riddle of his dreams. And some of the guys that served time with him said there was a Hebrew boy, old Joe, seemed to have this gift of interpreting dreams, and they called for Joseph. But the same gift that got him in trouble, put a bullseye on him from his brothers and Potiphar's wife, finally made room for him when he was the only one who could solve the king's dreams. And he rose to becoming the Secretary of Agriculture in Egypt, second most powerful man in the world. In the providence of God, the wheels of justice may turn slow, but they grind ever so fine. The moral of the arc of the universe is long, but it does bend toward justice. And the same thing that got him in trouble got him out of trouble. He just had to keep on keeping on and walk in hope. There's a story of a lady, window of application. She was a teacher aide she was a maid in the school system in New York City. And they had a big snowstorm, and most of the teachers who lived in the suburbs couldn't get into the city to work, and these students who lived in the nearby projects were at school, and there were no teachers, so they would take the custodial staff and others and the administrative staff and put them into these classrooms and just monitor these kids till the teachers could get in. And one of the people was an old lady. She was a member of a local church, and she was usually walked around cleaning the floors and bathrooms and cafeteria, and she sat her in a room full of kids and said, just occupy them till the regular teacher comes. So she had to work from strength. She didn't know nothing about algebra or trigonometry or history or any of that thing. She didn't have the opportunity to go to school like that. So she sat them down in her very colloquial, southern-born manner. She said, babies, let me just tell you. She said, all I know is that just trust that whatever the Lord tell you to do, just do it, and everything will be fine. They laughed at her. And she said, listen, if the Lord told me to get up and walk through that door over there, I'd get up right now and start walking. Oh, and they just fell out laughing. And she said, why is y'all laughing? And one boy raised his hand. He said, ma'am, I know you're old, and you don't look like you can see too good. Because, ma'am, ain't no door at the wall you pointed at. She said, you think you're smart, don't you, young man? She said, I knows there ain't no door. She said, but this is what you don't know. If the Lord told me to get up and walk through that door over there, I'd get up and start walking, because by the time I got there, the Lord would have made a door. And that's what I'm trying to tell you all here today. Hope is when you can get up and start walking in a direction that seems like there is no possibility. I was raised in Bethlehem Baptist Church, 1725 South I Street in Tacoma, Washington, center of the known world. And I heard sermon after sermon about God will make a way somehow. And so sometimes I want to take the ethereal and pull it down and make it walk. So when I graduated from the University of Puget Sound from a family that didn't give me not one penny, not one dime for any of my educational costs, for any of the 3 earned degrees that I have, not college, not master's degree, not doctorate degree. I came from a family that did not have one dime to give me toward any of my educational costs. And when I got ready to go to seminary, I got accepted to the Colgate-Rochester Divinity School, but had no money, and because I was starting in January instead of September, all the financial aid had been given out in September, and they said, you can come, but we have no money to offer you. I scraped together a plane ticket from a little job that I had, and I was on my way to Rochester, though I had no way of paying the tuition and the housing when I got there. My mama said, you must be crazy. And she told the pastor about it. She said, I got to stop him. He's going to go to a strange city where he doesn't know anybody, he doesn't have a dime, and all I knew is y'all keep saying the Lord will make a way somehow. I believe it. I had my plane ticket. The pastor called me down to the church to talk to me the night before I was going to leave. Went down to his office, which was in the basement of the church. When I flipped on the light down in the basement, because for some reason the lights were off, opened it up, and the church was full of people, all of my old Sunday school teachers, the deacons, the choir, and everybody. They saw a young man who, when I was younger, I could steal the paint off your car. They saw somehow or another, slowly but surely, my mind began to turn toward positive things. I began to change the company that I kept. I made friends with books and not boys on the corner. And they decided they wanted to invest in this young man who seemed to hold on to the hope that they had been preaching. And they came and randomly gave. And that night, I walked out of there with every dime that I needed to pay my tuition and my housing for that semester. And while I was there, I earned a scholarship that kept me the next 2.5 years. I'm telling you, if you just get started, God can make a door where there doesn't appear to be one. Faith! Now faith is the evidence of things unseen. It is the substance of things hoped for. I'll tell you one more story and I'll get out your way. There was a young lady. She came from a good family, believed in education. She was a smart girl at the top of her class. She went off to college, and the worst fear of any parents of a young girl came to pass. She got pregnant. And like most jokers who say they'll never leave you, no sooner after she got pregnant, he took off and really never came back. And to make matters worse, you tell young ladies, well, you made one mistake, let's move beyond this. Well, it happened again. He was gone. And you say, well, wow, what can get worse about this story? Well, it did get worse. She got sick. And she died. And these parents were brokenhearted that this girl did not fulfill the dreams they had for her. She had these 2 babies by these guys who apparently were not worth much or nothing. And then she died, and there they are, middle-aged, stuck with these 2 kids, trying to raise them. The boy, the oldest one, he would end up experimenting with drugs as a teenager, but then he would turn himself around. Lo and behold, in the providence of a God who has a way of taking Joseph's seed, seeds trying to grow in the bad soil of challenging families, in the bad soil of imperfect societies. And on January the 20th, 2009, that young boy from that challenging background in this imperfect society put one hand on the Bible and raised the other before the Chief Justice of the United States of America and took the oath of office as the 44th President of these United States of America. And so I join another one of Joseph's seed, Barack Hussein Obama, who came from a challenging family in an imperfect society. Tell all of you in this room today, yes we can, yes we can, yes we can, yes we can. God bless you and God keep you.